It really does drive home. This did not start on October 7th. To see the death of a journalist when we've heard about how many journalists have been targeted and assassinated and killed in Gaza, it's a reminder that this is not new. This is not a result of, a attack. This has been happening for a very long time.
I think for me, it was really powerful, Shireen's story, to be included in there too, because it just shows and proves that even journalists aren't safe. And journalists who are meant to be protected under every circumstance to tell the truth about what's happening in a country, the fact that she was not safe says a lot.
I want a permanent and a sustained ceasefire, but beyond that, there's a lot more to have a conversation about. It's not just about a ceasefire. It's about an end to the occupation. It's about, a return of the ability of right of return and resources. And, there's so much more to this. Divesting is incredibly important, but I always say investing is also incredibly important. And in order for there to be a future free Palestine, we need to invest in what that future Palestine looks like and what freedom looks like and invest in that freedom.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Political Pendejadas. This is your host, Constanza Eliana Chinea, and I am back for another episode. Now, I have had to record this intro multiple times because the news cycle has just been so crazy lately that this is literally the fourth time I'm recording the intro for this specific episode, and it is absolutely nuts. The reason why it has taken me so long to get this to you is because not only did we have an attempted presidential assassination, we also had the current president drop out of the race. And now we have a presumptive nominee of Kamala Harris, who was the vice president, right? Then we had Netanyahu speak in Congress literally as of a day ago, as I'm recording this. And then for today's guest, that's tied to today's guest, we also had a major flop, a major cancel moment for Adidas, where they featured Bella Hadid as in one of their ads. And then they decided to apologize for that and then take the ad down. So it has literally been a hot mess, not to mention all of the things that are still happening in Palestine, in Congo, and Sudan. So there's literally so much happening that every time I go to post this podcast episode, something else happens. And then I feel like, okay, I need to record another intro for this. So this is the last intro. This is it. You are listening to this podcast episode today. So before we get into today's guest, I want to start off with the Trump assassination attempt. So when it happened, so many conspiracy theories were going around, and I completely understood why, right? Like, Trump and his allies are liars. They are known to exaggerate. They are known to give away fake news or fake facts. And so a lot of people were very much like, what is happening here? Is this real? Can we actually trust it? Can we believe it? And yes, it was very much 100% real. Now, the details of the shooter are still a little bit murky. They are still trying to figure out who exactly this person was. He did not appear to have a social media presence. When his name was presented by the New York Post or whoever it was that were the first ones to say who the shooter was, nobody else had confirmed it. And so the first thing I did was look this person up on social media, and they had no social media. And so I was even a little bit skeptical, but then more outlets started coming out saying that he does not have a social media presence, but it is in fact him that was the shooter. So the whole thing was chaotic. It was bananas. We even had, somebody who I, personally like their opinions, but has had issues in the past with spreading misinformation. Amanda Seales was even saying, it's fake blood, it's theater blood, things like that. So That was a very interesting thing that happened. Hopefully by now, since it's been at least 2-3 weeks since that happened, you are all aware that it was not a hoax. Now, we're still trying to get the details on what exactly happened there, if the guy was apolitical. I mean, we say that in terms of like what was his affiliation, because it seemed like he was both into Democrats and Republicans. However, an attempted assassination on a Republican president does not seem apolitical at all. So there's just a lot that we still are unaware of, but that was one thing that I wanted to make sure I pointed out. It did happen. There was a lot of conspiracy theories attached to it. However, it was not a hoax. Now, the second thing that happened was we had a Biden dropout. He is no longer going to run for office for 2024. And that is significant because we are only 4 months away from November. So this was definitely something I personally did not think that it was going to happen. I didn't think that the Democrats had it in them to have Biden drop out after a disastrous Trump and Biden debate. We all saw that Biden was looking like he was lost in translation sometimes. He was lost in his own mind. He couldn't finish his sentences. He would go from one topic to another, even though he was only asked one question. I mean, it really, truly was a disastrous debate. I did not think that the Democrats had it in them. I did not think that Biden had it in him to drop out. By all intents and purposes, he was leaking to the press that he was not going to drop out. And then lo and behold, last weekend, he dropped out. And so this is super significant because, of course, everyone was saying, well, who, looking around the room, who is going to be the nominee if it's not Biden? I think that was a lot of the concern. And, even though we live in a quote unquote democracy, the establishment loves to give us the nominees instead of us picking as a collective who the nominee is going to be. And so rightly so, everyone was like, well, if they skip over the VP, that's not going to be a good look. And I think all of us who pay attention to the news cycle and who pay attention to politics knew that it was most likely going to be Kamala Harris. And as of a few days ago, we have Kamala Harris as the presumptive nominee. She has raised millions and millions and millions of dollars just in the span of a day or two since her nomination and since she accepted the nomination. So this is pretty significant. I think that it has reinvigorated some of the Democrats who were very much either going to stay home or vote for somebody else, vote for a third party candidate in November. However, you and I know, since you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you and I know that establishment centrist Democrats are not progressive Democrats, right? And the millennials and Gen Z that are coming up into Gen Z now, coming into voting age, they're by and large progressives. And so picking a centrist is a choice for the establishment. It's definitely a choice. And I think we all understand and know why they are choosing these people and why they are refusing to get with the times. However, she is a younger face. She is a fresher face. And by all the polling, she does much better than Biden in most of the polling. Where she is doing badly is with Arab Americans. She is still down with Latino voters, and she is slightly up, but slightly up with Black voters. And I think this is something that is has a lot to do with her having Zionist leanings, her refusing to give up tax dollars and revenue and funding for Israel and their arms war. This has a lot to do with her history. She has a long history that we can fact check around incarceration, her being a prosecutor, and the things that she has voted for, especially when she was a senator. And the fact that she has been the backup to the Biden administration, on immigration, for example, we remember that she literally went to Latin America and told and scolded Latinos and said, do not come to the United States. You are not welcome here. And that is something that she cannot hide from. And so there is a lot of conversation online about whether or not she's going to be able to get away from this history, if she is going to be able to get away from the criticism, and be able to actually beat out Trump. I think where Kamala Harris definitely beats Trump is in debates. She is a great debater. Obviously, as a prosecutor, she had a lot of practice with that. She is going to demolish a debate, no doubt about it. However, demolishing a debate does not necessarily mean that she's going to get enough Democratic voters to beat out a Republican nomination. I think that still, and I posted about this on social media, I think that even still, Democrats are really underestimating just how conservative this country has gotten. And conservatives, by and large, support MAGA. They just do. And it can baffle us all day long. We can say that they are voting against their interests all day long. It doesn't change the fact that there is a huge population, electorate that, or not voter electorate, but there is a huge population of voters that are leaning very conservatively. And so what the Democrats need to understand, and you probably remember hearing this from my conversation with Francesca Fiorentini, that the fractures within the Democratic Party are something that the establishment has to stop ignoring. And continuing to push for centrist Democrats is not necessarily going to give this particular voter base that is largely progressive and wants a defunding of the police in some manner. They want better immigration policies. They want DACA to be a thing that sticks, not something that every couple years needs to be talked about again. They want reproductive rights and women's rights. These are things that are very progressive, and centrists are continuing to try and be bipartisan with an increasingly dangerous conservative party. And so what that does is it really, really, really tires out, it exhausts Democratic voters, and it becomes a fracture, which we have been seeing for decades. And so this is not a shoo-in, in my opinion, for Harris. This is not going to be the huge switch up that Democrats were hoping for. When Biden dropped out, I remember posting on social media that, if Democrats don't fumble this could be the winner. Like, this could be the winning formula. And in my opinion, they fumbled again. That doesn't mean that I don't think a lot of people who weren't going to vote for Biden are now going to vote for Harris. That has become very clear on social media. It has become very clear with a certain type of voter base, Democratic voter base, that yes, she has reinvigorated some people who were not necessarily going to vote or not excited to vote. That doesn't mean that she is automatically going to win all of the Democratic votes. She is going to have to fight hard against the tide. And that is something that a lot of people who just found out about Project 2025 are having to contend with. And this is something that I'm consistently arguing with people in the comments section of my Instagram about, because I have known that, Republicans have been trying to put Project 2025 into play for decades. Now they just put it in writing and gave it a name, but it's something that they have been actively working through for decades. And just because the public now have a name to attach to these policies that they are trying to enact doesn't mean that it wasn't happening before and that it won't continue to happen even if Harris gets into office. And so Project 2025 is being weaponized against a certain Democratic progressive base that, they're definitely trying to manipulate those voters into voting Harris. I think that's a bad strategy. I think if you are the type of person that is scared about Project 2025 because you just found out about it, I think that's a good thing. I think it's too late. And I definitely think that waiting until a presidential election to care about these issues is too late. However, that doesn't mean that we can't course correct. And so what people need to do now, those Democratic voters who really want Harris to win this presidency for the reasons of Project 2025, to prevent that from being enacted, even though, again, these are things that they have been trying to enact for decades and have been successful in some cases. If you are that type of person, then the way to get people to vote for a Harris ticket is not to manipulate them and to gaslight them into thinking that Harris is this perfect candidate, because she clearly has flaws and she has a record that we can fact check. So this is going to be a very interesting election. I knew it was going to be chaotic a year ago, but it has definitely gotten a little bit more chaotic now. So that's another thing that happened. Now let's talk about Netanyahu. I really don't know how to properly say his name, but Netanyahu from Israel came to Congress and gave a speech. And it really shows that America has learned absolutely nothing from our Holocaust education all through our public education in this country. We learn about the Holocaust and we learn about political propaganda and we learn about Hitler at a very young age in this country. And the fact that we now have somebody who is committing a genocide and represents a country that has stolen land in order to create itself and is enacting a neo-colonial government policy, and is now, as of literally this past week, the ICJ has ruled that Israel is indeed an apartheid state. That is in writing. It is a ruling that happened. So now we can definitively say that it is an apartheid state. We could have said that before the ICJ ruling, but for a lot of people, that's what it takes, is legalities. And the United States Congress invited this man to come and speak and did not take any of this into consideration. And so we are living in very, 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 very strange times, very dangerous times. And I think this is going to be a stain on American history for sure. It is currently pains me to even have to speak about it because it is that bananas. Al Jazeera reported that Netanyahu's speech had 49 standing ovations in total. 49 standing ovations. And on social media, we saw the viral photos and video of Rashida Tlaib being the single and sole Democrat who was sitting down, holding up a sign saying, "You're a murderer," basically. And she was the only one. Now, what I didn't realize that I posted on social media that she was, that Democrats should be ashamed for standing up and clapping and being a part of this fucking circus. What I didn't realize is that half of the Democratic Party, or a little less than half of the Democratic Party, actually didn't even show up because they were protesting the speech. Now, do I think that was a good idea? In hindsight, no. Would I would I have fought for them to boycott it? Yes. But seeing the picture and the photo of Rashida Tlaib being the sole person, the sole Democrat with a spine to really say, this is atrocious, I think it was a bad idea for them not to show up. I think they should have shown up. They should have had their backs turned to him and been a visualization of how unpopular this person is and what a bad idea it was to invite him onto Congress, into Capitol Hill. 49 standing ovations is still atrocious. 49. And it was most of the room that was standing up in each ovation. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. So that is another thing that happened, which leads us into today's guest, because we spoke a lot about this. Our guest today is Palestinian and Irish American, Alana Hadid, who is an activist. She is she's in the fashion industry. She was a model as well, alongside her sisters Bella and Gigi. And now she is one of the founders of Watermelon Pictures, which aims to bring about Arab and Palestinian representation into media, specifically Hollywood. And so I am super excited to bring this interview over to you because it was a long time in the making. I had been running into Alana at different places, and we know a lot of the same people. And so I invited her to come onto the podcast, and she graciously did. And this was weeks ago. And so because of my schedule and because of everything, I was not able to bring this interview to you until now. But it brings us into this next topic of the Adidas fumble. So Adidas placed an ad, I believe it was a 1972 ad, or, style, where Bella was wearing a certain, very athletic outfit, and it was to promote a new Adidas line. Immediately, after posting the ad, they then apologized for anybody who may have been, I forget the word that they used, but anybody who may have been, upset about the ad, or upset that that Bella Hadid specifically was in the ad, and very vague about that as well. And then they pulled the ad. The ad is no longer going to be up. This is such a huge disaster for them. Why? Because who would be upset other than Zionists that you have Bella Hadid on an ad for a shoe line? Okay. So it is very, very clear to myself and literally everyone on the internet that just the mere fact that she is Palestinian is what is upsetting Zionists. And Adidas decided to pull the ad because of that. So now Adidas has very obvious Zionist leanings. And this is a conversation that was all over social media, rightly so. I mean, it is so obvious that they pulled it because she is Palestinian, because that this is her heritage and nothing else. Clearly, they wanted her to be on the ad. Clearly, she was not pushing Palestine in the ad. And yet they still decided to pull it because Zionist feelings got hurt. A huge fumble. And this is not new with capitalism and all of the performativeness that comes into capitalist society and capitalist corporations. And so, this is definitely something that is going to be remembered. The BDS movement has added Adidas, or maybe it was always on their list, but now it is definitely on their list. And it's pretty wild. Now, personally, for me, you guys know that I do not support any companies that have ties to exploiting the global South or, workers in the global South. And so Adidas is not a company that I ever supported. However, I do think that this nonetheless is a fumble on their end, and it is going to drastically hurt them just like it hurt Starbucks, who has recently given even more numbers as to how much the BDS movement has hurt them. So this is a conversation, the Adidas ad was a conversation that I very briefly had with Alana behind the scenes. Now, because Bella has not put out a statement as of the recording of this video with you, she hasn't put out a statement about it yet. And so Alana didn't want to give a statement before Bella had a chance to. And so I can't necessarily give you anything in terms of that. But what I will say is that perhaps the reason Bella is taking a little bit of time getting a statement out is because she's hurt. I mean, obviously, just by your very existence being Palestinian and the industry just taking a toll on Palestinian celebrities and activists. People have lost opportunities. They've lost brand deals. They've lost so much, similar to journalists like myself who have lost opportunities as well over speaking about this. I think that this is a time where people are just really, really unsure of how to react and how to respond. I think it is a very, very chaotic time for people. And I'm sure that Bella herself is feeling a huge type of way about this. And so she's taking her time crafting a response, and so is Alana. In support of her sister. And so that brings us to today's interview, which I am so excited about. Obviously, I've recorded this 4 different times, and each time I've said, I'm very excited to bring you this interview. So Alana and I talked about the failed ceasefire resolution that happened about a month ago. At the time that we recorded this, it was fresh, so that was one of the things that we definitely talked about. The ceasefire obviously has not happened, and so a lot of the things that we talked about in the episode came true. And this is definitely something that is very important to her. But we also talked about Watermelon Pictures and all of the, goals and aims that they have, her and her brother, who are also co-founders of Watermelon Pictures, all of the goals that they have for Palestinian representation in media. We talked a little bit about that. And we talked about, some of her personal life as well. So here is the interview. I hope you enjoy. All right. Alana Hadid, thank you so much for being here today on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
I know. We have been trying to make this happen for a while, and you have been so busy.
I'm only a little bit hectic, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, you've been busy in the best way. I feel like you've really been out there really advocating for Palestinian liberation, going to the protests. Like, it's been really fantastic to see you all of them. I know that you went to Washington, D.C.
I did.
Yes. And you've really just tried to put yourself out there as much as possible. So what has it been like for you to be this active in such a short amount of time? I mean, 7-8 months now. And obviously you've been an activist since before October. But what has it felt like in the last 7 months?
That's a good question. I mean, I always say that specifically Palestinians, but, all oppressed people are activists by design. Yeah. We're not intentionally activists. We're not going out and I'm going to be an activist, but, we don't have any other choice. Yeah. And so I think a lot of my activism was kind of social media based and, and working with people, kind of philanthropic. And when everything started happening after October, I felt like I had to really step out of my comfort zone. A lot of people think that I'm really comfortable giving speeches because I've been doing it and been very active doing it, but I'm not. It's not something public speaking is not something I love doing something like this and having a conversation, but public speaking was not something I wanted to do. And even right in October, I was asked to do speeches and I kind of shied away from it. I was like, that's not really my purpose. But I felt like I had something to say and there was a necessity to be louder. Mm-hmm. And so it's been very hectic. It's been beautiful. I do really kind of feel like I'm in my purpose. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, everyone is stepping out of their comfort zone in order to speak out more loudly for, the things that are happening around the world. And right now, I want to talk about Palestine. So I'm going to make myself uncomfortable to do it.
Yeah. I mean, you pull it off really well.
Thank you.
Your speeches have been really powerful.
Thank you.
Watching them on social media has been really powerful. And you've been very open about telling your story, your family's story. You are Palestinian American. Your dad is the son of a survivor of the Nakba. And so, as a family that is so influential and has so many eyeballs on them, what is that like as a family? Like, to talk about this moment in time is so historical. Do you have constant conversations about it, or is it something that you're kind of like?
Oh, we always talk about it.
Yeah.
As a family, but I think there was a little bit of a difference that I've heard and seen and witnessed now from having more interactions with Palestinians, as they're slightly few and far between, and as we're finding out now, there's more and more and more people coming out and kind of saying, and I always say, like, I've always been openly Palestinian. Like, I was out of the closet as a child. I was always a Palestinian, and even though people were very rightfully scared to be open about being Palestinian. A lot of people said they were Jordanian or Lebanese or Syrian, and a lot of them were in a lot of ways because, they had been displaced to those countries.
Right.
We were just always Palestinian. And so to talk about Palestine never felt uncomfortable for me. It was something that I'd been doing since I was a child, and I wasn't pushed to, but I was proud of being Palestinian, just like anyone is proud of their heritage. I'm also proud of being Irish, and I'm half Irish, so I just spoke about it like I would of my Irish side, and I think it's always difficult. You lose work, people don't want to touch that subject. It's intentionally like that. There are systems literally set up in this country and other countries in order to silence people and to make them feel uncomfortable for talking about Palestine. So, yes, of course it's uncomfortable. But truthfully, I feel proud of it just like I would feel proud if I was, Italian or Lebanese or, South American or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's something that's really relatable for a lot of people. I'm from Puerto Rico, and we're dealing with a lot of U.S. imperialism, a lot of colonization. And so for us, it feels very normal to be like very prideful of being Puerto Rican. But obviously, we're not under a military occupation. We're under a different type of occupation. It's a little less taboo to talk about being Puerto Rican. And I've heard a lot of Palestinians say, like you mentioned, that it's very difficult to be openly existing as a Palestinian because there's so much Zionist rhetoric and propaganda. So for you speaking out, and you're in the fashion industry, and you've had opportunities taken away from you, you've lost friends, you've been very vocal about that. What is it like being in an industry that has still to contend with the Zionist agenda?
I mean, I feel like every industry is contending with the Zionist agenda, so I can't call out one or without, talking about all of them.
Yeah.
And like I said, this is a system that has been set up for decades in order to get us to the place we're in now, where, you can paint Palestinians or Palestinian supporters with this broad brush of terrorism. And that is intentional, and not just for Palestinians, but for, many different people that are being oppressed and subjugated throughout the world. The intention is to be able to just say, oh, they're terrorists, and then you don't have to pay attention to their humanity. Right. And so, I mean, I'm in fashion, and fashion, as well as almost every other industry, has a large Zionist contingency. And so there are, companies who don't want to work with me. There are definitely people who've backed away. I think just recently it came out that there was this woman who owns a PR company in Los Angeles who I worked with before. And she wrote an internal email to—
Is this the A-list?
Yes.
I saw it.
Yeah. She wrote an internal email that is not internal anymore.
Not anymore.
That basically said, we're not working with anyone who is anti-Israel.
Yeah.
If you want to know, this is a quote, like what anti-Israel is, just ask me, I'll let you know. Anyone who's saying that it's a genocide is anti-Israel, things like that.
Yeah.
And then she kind of made a comment at the end that I thought was odd. Well, not odd, but kind of hilarious. It was like, when this blows over.
Yeah.
And, basically we'll go back to working with these people. And she was still following me on Instagram. I had blocked them a long time ago.
That's
I'm
wild.
sorry, unfollowed them a long time ago. But it's wild. It's wild the way people are allowed to function.
Yeah.
And I think that it's really scary for them because they're being called out at every stage. People, social media is really changing the game in that respect. So I'm proud of, being in a position where I can, call out the people that need to be called out. I can not work with the people. I'm privileged in that way that I cannot work with those people. And I recognize that privilege. Not everyone has that privilege. So I can pick and choose who I work with. And I have been for a while. So I feel that kind of bubble, but you're always affected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, definitely you've been vocal about losing opportunities. I know Bella has been vocal for years about losing opportunities, especially when she's being photographed at a protest.
Yeah.
It's like almost immediately the backlash way before October.
Yes.
And Gigi recently has had some backlash for attending the Met Gala.
Yeah.
What are those conversations like? Because it has to be hard. I mean, this is the industry that you're both in. You're both having to make decisions that are going to not just affect you personally, but also the community. I mean, people really care about this, care about you as a very loud and proud Palestinian. Is that hard to make those type of decisions? Like, should I go? Should I not go?
Well, I think for me, I mean, I can really only speak for myself, but for me, I always consider it, but at the same time, I also have to consider whether or not it's important that I hide and I don't go and put myself in public arenas where I'm a loud and open Palestinian and that I'm, on that same red carpet or on that same, in that same arena as, people who are very openly supporting a genocide of my people. So, we always have to consider. I think in a lot of realms, it's important for Palestinian representation in every avenue, on every stage, in every place. And there's always going to be people who don't like what we're doing, whether or not it's in or outside of our community. And that's just the truth. When you're a public person, you have to, deal with scrutiny. And so there's always going to be scrutiny. If I sat around and worried about all the time about what everyone said, I would never leave my home. So, I wouldn't be able to do an interview. I wouldn't go, I'd worried about, what clothing I'm wearing or how, and we do worry about those things. Those are things that are, constantly on my mind. And I think all Palestinians and all people, but especially people who are, are in the public realm. We worry about it.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. I know that my DMs are full of death threats and constant vitriol from Zionists. I can only imagine what it's like when you have millions of followers. So definitely it's difficult to figure out, okay, where do I go? How do I stand for this and that? So I definitely feel for you and your family, but you yourself have just been doing a fantastic job.
Thank you.
Watching you kind of evolve, not just being in the fashion industry, but now with Watermelon Pictures, which I definitely want to get the background story on that.
Sure.
What has that journey been like to not just be at the protests and be vocal on social media, but now to like really be in the media industry, really fighting for representation?
Yeah.
Like, what has that journey been like?
Well, I always thought it was really important. I think divesting is incredibly important, but I always say investing is also incredibly important. And in order for there to be a future free Palestine, we need to invest in what that future Palestine looks like and what freedom looks like, and invest in that freedom and our stories and our narrative. And so I think that's what Watermelon Pictures is one microcosm of investing in what a free Palestine can look like. And so, changing the narrative is so important, and reframing. And so I'm just excited that I can be a part of that, and that it's my job is phenomenal. That's a type of security in that I know that it's never going away because of my advocacy. And that, I was like a breath of fresh air. I think that there's so many people who want that. And I'm always advocating for people, if they have the means or if they feel inclined, to take whatever industry they're in and try to create that for, for people, for Palestine, for any people. I feel like there's so many subjugated and oppressed people who are never getting seen and heard for their humanity and for who they truly are. All the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful, the whole spectrum of who they are. And so I just think it's beautiful that I get to do that with Watermelon Pictures. But it's been a huge shift. It's been a huge shift for me. I've always been creative directing for different brands and for my own, and to be able to do it for this brand just feels like I'm really investing in the future of a free Palestine.
Yeah, it's a big move. It's a bold move.
Yes.
But it's already really taking off. I definitely want to get into the weeds of that.
Sure.
But, you and I connected over, the fact that I'm in the media industry in the politics realm. You're going to be in the media industry in the Hollywood sense of the word. Watching the news over the last 8 months has been really difficult. The disinformation, the state-sponsored propaganda, all of these things. I was lucky enough to be invited by you to the Walled Off screening that you had here in Los Angeles. And one particular scene that I remember was Shireen Abu Akleh's story and the background of how much that affected not just Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, but also in the U.S. I remember because I was sitting behind you, maybe 2 rows behind you. I'm sobbing. I'm trying to find my tissues. And I remember looking off at you because I heard somebody else sniffle. And I looked at you and you were also crying.
Yeah, you're going to make me cry.
I know. It was such, just her story is so incredible. Her legacy is so incredible. But to have it end with such tragedy was really difficult to watch. Why did you feel so emotional watching that?
Well, slightly ironically, I've seen Walled Off about in every iteration because I'm obviously my brother was a producer, but I'm quite good friends with Vin Arfuso, who is the director. And so I had seen every edit of that film. And he was editing it before Shireen died. And it was quite important to him to add the death of Shireen into the film for multiple reasons. It affects me on a lot of levels because she was, for a lot of people, the voice of Palestine. She was the way that a lot of people outside of Palestine understood what was happening on the ground in Palestine.
Yeah.
How Palestinians felt seen and heard by her. And she was, just a huge part of journalism in the region. And her death was strategic. It was an assassination. And I think that is super important for people to understand. She was assassinated as a journalist wearing her vest and her helmet. She was, shot, I think, right behind the ear, which is, an assassin shot, a sniper shot. And her funeral was attacked by the IDF. I think a lot of people don't understand as well that Shireen was a Palestinian American, and she was an American citizen as well. So that is not just the death of a Palestinian journalist, but of a Palestinian American journalist. And she was also Christian. I think that the Christian Palestinian population is really ignored. In order to support—
Very strategically ignored.
in order to support the narrative of, Muslim extremism. So, there's so many layers. She's kind of emblematic of a lot of the things that have been happening to Palestinians for so long. Her death and her life as well were incredibly, poignant in pointing out what has been happening, as well as the ties between Israel and the United States. And so, just seeing her on film, and seeing, her work, and seeing her horrific death, which was filmed, and just, and seeing the horrible tragedy of how the IDF attacked her funeral. Just, all stages. Just, it opens me up, and makes me feel, the sadness of so much of what's been happening to Palestine, to our journalists, to our people. And I think that's why I cry every time I hear about Shireen.
Yeah, it was powerful. I mean, it was masterfully done, the way that the story was told and walled off, which was a little bit inconspicuous, right? Because you think it's about the Banksy Hotel.
That's intentional.
Yes, and then your heartstrings get pulled and ripped out of you as soon as you start, kind of going down the journey of the occupation, what it's like to live under occupation.
Yeah.
I think for me, it was really powerful, Shireen's story, to be included in there too. Because it just shows and proves that even journalists aren't safe. And journalists who are meant to be protected under every circumstance to tell the truth about what's happening in a country, the fact that she was not safe says a lot.
I mean, I think also I always say that Walled Off is one of the most digestible documentaries that's out there, and I firmly believe that.
Yeah.
But I think what was also interesting about this film is that it's so of the now, even of what's happening, but it was filmed over the last, I think, like 3-ish years, 3 or 4 years, more, I think even. And so it really does drive home. This did not start on October 7th. And, I think to see the death of a journalist, when we've heard about how many journalists have been targeted and assassinated and killed in Gaza, it's a reminder that this is not new. This is not a result of, a attack. This has been happening for a very long time. Journalists and Palestinian journalists and any journalists that cover Palestine in a favorable manner, or the truth, are targeted. So I think it's important. This film is important in driving home that idea and that reality that this did not start just in October.
Yeah. No, it really drives it home very, very effectively.
Yeah.
Walled Off is not the only movie that is part of the Watermelon Pictures family. What can we expect from Watermelon moving forward? Like, what kind of stories can we expect?
I mean, you can expect all stories because, as I said, Palestinians are like any other people. We run the gamut of human emotions because we are human. So, and we are talented and we have beautiful stories to tell, not just of our tragedy, but of our joy and our humanity and our love. And so, we want to show all sorts of things. I mean, we're hoping that at some point we can do some beautiful romantic comedies. Like I want to see
some
everything.
rom-coms?
Yeah, I mean, why not? We deserve to be able to be shown in all of our different lights.
I love that.
And so, you can expect all of that. We're definitely going to be acquiring a lot of documentaries and film that have not been seen by a wide audience. And that's kind of our focus right now, is that we really want to make sure that these amazing films that have been either buried or thrown to the wayside or never seen by the Western world are seen. So, we say from the river to the screen, Palestine will be seen. And it's just really important that we allow those amazing films that have been made over the last decades, many, many years ago, that those are seen first. And then, we are working on a lot of films that will come out in the next couple of years.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest questions I got about Watermelon, a couple people sent me something else to ask you. So, one of my taglines is representation isn't decolonization.
Yeah.
Like, you really have to work at decolonizing through representation. It's not the be all end all.
Yes.
And one of the major questions that I got specifically was around Afro-Palestinian representation. And is that something that's important to Watermelon Pictures?
100%. Right now we are trying to find more films that have been made because there have been a lot of films made, and we're trying to acquire those films first because I do think, again, it is incredibly important that the films that have already been made get their time.
Yeah.
So yes, it is incredibly important to me. It's a subject that's not touched on a lot.
Not at all,
It's a subject that a lot of people don't think about, don't hear about, don't talk about. And I think, as well, we need to talk about all the different aspects of it. There's anti-Black racism everywhere in the world. So to disregard that would be glossing over realities. So yes, we want to talk about all of it, look at all of it, and so we are definitely in the beginning stages of acquiring films that have already been made because there are a bunch.
That's great. I think a lot of people were really happy to hear that.
Oh yeah, and I think it's important. I'm glad that you asked the question because it's not necessarily. I don't necessarily talk about what we're doing behind the scenes because I'm trying to kind of keep some stuff. But I'm so happy that you asked me because it is incredibly important. It's incredibly important to me, and I think in telling larger stories, our representation needs to be whole. We are not just here to represent the story that we want people to hear.
Right.
We want to represent all the stories. And there are beautiful Afro-Palestinian stories that are about their love and joy and the things that they've experienced under occupation as well.
Yeah.
But, there are also stories that are not as beautiful, that, that are sad and tragic. And those stories need to be told as well. And so in representation, you need to do whole representation. And we plan on doing that. As, we're a small company. We're working as hard as we can to try to do, find these films and acquire these films and then make more films. But yes, that is incredibly important to us. And so thank you for asking me that.
No, absolutely. People will be very happy to hear that. I think one of the biggest misconceptions that is obviously a part of disinformation in the United States is that, why should anybody care about the Palestinians? They're all just brown and, whatever. And that there's, colorism is definitely a part of the conversation. But not many people realize, like, Afro-Palestinians exist, Black Palestinians exist and have existed for thousands of years and are currently, experiencing multiple layers of oppression.
But I think a lot of people, what they don't really understand is that, there's conversations around that. There's also conversations around the LGBTQ community. There's conversations around other subjugated communities within the Palestinian communities.
Yep.
All those communities exist, but when you're under a military occupation, the first thing that all of these people, and I can't speak for every single person, but the ones that I've spoken to in these separate communities within the Palestinian community have said, I'm more worried about being killed by Israel. That is the first worry that I have. Once we are free and we're in a position where we have even a modicum of ability to rule ourselves or sovereignty over ourselves, then we can really sort out the issues that are happening within our community, because those are real issues that everyone deals with on a daily basis. But the first issue is that we are being genocided, occupied, subjugated, ethnically cleansed. And that is what I've heard from, Palestinians in the LGBTQ community, Black Palestinians, Afro-Palestinians, all these different communities that are within the Palestinian community is like, I'm worried about my life first.
Yeah.
And then I will worry about whether or not I have the freedoms to live it openly.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's a good point that you're bringing up because the Israeli government does a great job of pinkwashing. We are currently filming this in June during Pride Month.
Yes.
And there's a lot of pinkwashing going on. Obviously, the U.S. has an issue with it too. But Israel specifically loves to hold up the flag in the rebel and, claim to be, such an open democracy to all types of people, when in reality, that's not the case.
Well, that's a colonizer mentality, specifically, and not specifically, but definitely settler colonial, mentality of, the United States it's imperialist. The United States does it all the time. They're always bringing democracy to different, Arab countries. Like we will give them hair salons so that they can, take off their hijab, like as though there aren't women who've chosen to be covered and just, things of that nature. I mean, I think it's important to point out as well, gay marriage isn't legal in Israel. So we can just stop talking about that. Two men cannot get married in anywhere in Israel, Tel Aviv or without. There's a lot of, as everywhere, there is a lot of homophobic, gay, trans hate in Israel.
Yep.
So to not address it, to act like the gay pride parade that they have in Tel Aviv is emblematic of the country is ridiculous. That's like saying that all of California loves gay people because we have West Hollywood.
Right.
That's insane. And that's just not the reality. You know, if you drive an hour from here after you go to to a pride parade, that doesn't mean that you're going to be safe.
Right.
And the same goes for Israel. There's, I think there was a pride parade in Jerusalem at one point, and a bunch of people got, stabbed and murdered and hurt and injured. So it's just ridiculous. It's a way of, there's no pride in genocide. You can't act as though you are, bringing these beautiful views to the world when you're also occupying people. And those people that are being occupied, there are gay Palestinians who are being occupied, put in detention, murdered, genocided, bombed. So
sexually
assaulted.
There's a new report that just came out about
100%. Yes. So yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous, and I get that from Zionists all the time. You'll be stoned, or
move to Gaza,
and I'm like,
see
that's what
happens.
I always say. Thank you for supporting Palestinian right of return when they say move to Gaza. They hate that. They don't even realize they're doing it. That's exactly what we're trying to do is move back to Palestine. So thank you for supporting us.
Thanks for the reminder.
I'm like, go out and get your Palestinian flag because you are a big Palestinian supporter.
It's really important to bring out these things because we currently have an administration and a president that is consistently passing on Israeli disinformation. One of the things that I have loved about following you on Instagram is that you created an entire channel, a broadcast channel, to keep people in the loop of what's happening.
Yeah.
Now, as a journalist, I know how intensive that can be to constantly look at the news and then put it online and then look at the news and put it online. Are you exhausted?
Yeah. I mean, yes. I'd love to pretend like I'm not.
Yeah.
Everyone is like, you have so much energy. And no, I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
We're all exhausted. But there's two parts to that. That's intentional. We're intentionally, mentally, and physically exhausted. They're not going to make it easy on us to it's not easy to gain freedom and also to advocate. So, all activists are exhausted. All journalists are exhausted. But the other part of that is I look at my friends who are on the ground. My friends who are on the ground everywhere. My friends who are in Gaza, who are in 48, who are in the West Bank, and they are not only exhausted, but starving or, under siege or ethnically cleansed or oppressed or, and I, although don't feel very free in this country anymore.
Yeah.
I am, I have the freedom of a lot of things and the luxury and the privilege of a lot of things. And so, I always say, like, this isn't me speaking. I'm being a bullhorn for Palestinians. And so I have to continue to do that. And I rest when I can and I sleep when I can. And, and I take time off of social media while I sleep.
Yeah. The 8 hours. Yeah. Hopefully 8 hours.
8 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
It's, it's like we have to keep going. We don't really have a choice.
Yeah.
So
does it feel like a responsibility?
It is.
Yeah.
Yes. 100%. I think a lot of people think that I'm like, I also think it's funny, like a lot of it's mostly Zionists, obviously, or, anti-Palestinian people are like, oh, you're gaining all this clout because of it. And I'm like, do you think I'm over here like banking millions from being an activist?
As
like,
if you're capitalizing off of this moment.
No.
Right.
And it's just really not the truth. But I'm tired and we're exhausted, and it is like something on me. It is a weight on me to make sure that I'm doing, but it's a privilege that I have the ability to have a platform to speak.
Yeah.
Like, look at how many, if you could see the DMs of Palestinians just like desperately asking for help that I have, and, or emails like all day long. I have a place to say things that they don't. And especially, not just in Gaza and the West Bank, in 48, it's incredibly hard to speak out. Like, you're seeing Palestinians, Palestinians and Israelis being arrested for speaking in support of Palestine. So, I have that ability, so I'm going to use it.
And I think that level of responsibility for me, being in media and specifically in politics and news, it makes me sad because it feels like, because the media has so horrifically dropped the ball on this issue and for so many years, that now the onus and the responsibility feels like it's on Palestinians to debunk disinformation, stop misinformation when it's spreading, and to give the facts to the people. And it continues a cycle of distrust of the media and distrust of journalists. And so for me, while I love that you created that channel, I also felt like, wow, she shouldn't have to be exhausted. Yeah. You and the many other people, the hundreds of other influencers, Palestinian influencers, who have really taken this on of being like the beacon of information. Yeah. It's sad. It makes me frustrated.
All oppressed people have to educate people on their oppression. Yeah. And that's the sad part. Because, so many of these systems are set up in order. And I think, you said drop the ball. I think that's giving them too much credit.
Yeah.
It is. Drop the ball would mean like, you just didn't get to it.
Right.
This is an intentional glossing over, propagandic. This is all systemic and systematic, silencing.
Repression.
So, exactly.
Disinformation, propaganda.
Exactly. All of these things. To say that, they're just unaware, or, that they just dropped the ball on this, that's, I think it's like, actually, like, I'm flummoxed in the way that, like, it's frustrating for us that we are all having to do this, but we are not the only people as well. Palestinians are not the only people. And while we're doing it, I'm trying not to forget that, there are horrific things happening in Sudan, Congo, Ethiopia, like all over the world. Yeah. There are horrific things happening, and they also need attention. And it is horrific as well to see, Sudanese and Congolese and all of these people have to scream and years and years. I mean, we're 76 years, but 8 or 9 months in, this is years and years that no one's been paying attention as well. So I think it's super important that people also realize that while, I make a point to say, a free Palestine is the first step in universal and collective freedom. Like, if we tomorrow free Palestine, I don't stop there.
Right.
It's not like I get to go to sleep after that. Like,
exactly.
There are so many other places that need our attention and our voices. And I'm Palestinian, so I am giving the majority of my attention to that, but I will never stop talking about what's happening. And as well, because they are all interconnected. Mm-hmm. The people and the countries and the money behind all of these different ethnic cleansing and horrible genocides are all they're all in the same room.
Yeah, it's the same. It's typically the same leaders, the same people, political figures that cause harm in one area that are also connected to the harm in a different area. And that's been very clear with Congo specifically, but Sudan, obviously. Like, we can't ignore any of those areas of oppression, but violent genocides as well. One of the breaking news that we have heard is that the UN has finally passed a ceasefire deal. There is a lot of talk on whether or not it is actually going to happen. It appears to be that it might happen, but the U.S. is taking a lot of liberty right now with its rhetoric.
Can you see my face?
Yes, it's taking a lot of liberty with its rhetoric right now, where they are claiming that now it's up to Hamas to take the deal, and it's up to Hamas to fulfill their end of the ceasefire.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the onus is always put on Hamas, even though, again, I'm always hearing the Zionist Hasbara rhetoric that is, Hamas has, never accepted a ceasefire deal. They've denied ceasefire deals over and over and over again. Right. I think this fits very nicely into the narrative that the United States is trying to further a ceasefire. While it's been pretty obvious that they were involved in the hostage recovery mission that killed, close to 300 Palestinians, injuring more than 400 Palestinians.
Which, if it's true that the U.S. is involved in that, is a complete violation of international law.
Oh yeah, the Rome Statute. It's a violation of many different parts of international law, many different statutes of international law as well. It makes Biden a liar because he said very early on there would never be boots on the ground. Yep. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot to that. But this UN Security Council ceasefire resolution, I mean, I call bullshit, just to be totally honest, because it's like, how can you come, 9 months in, close to 9 months in, put up a ceasefire resolution when you rose your hand, and shot down and vetoed every ceasefire resolution that happened in the Security Council since October. Yep. So now you want to be looked at as the good guy and the savior. And this is very white savior, incredibly white savior. And even though, and I do want to point out that it's always, and I find it really sick, that there's always a person of color doing it. And I think it's important that they want to they're framing this in a very racialized way. And I find it really disgusting. Yeah. You're sending like an envoy to do your job. A white man is making a black woman look like she's the bad person. Right. I hate that. It really bothers me. And I just think like I'm hoping that we all want a ceasefire, but I don't want a ceasefire that is bullshit, because a ceasefire really needs to mean a permanent and lasting ceasefire. And when we've heard the rhetoric that's come out of Israel that has been ostensibly, we're going to keep fighting no matter what until Hamas is eliminated, which
it's never
which every military and political analyst and every person knows is not a possibility. Nope. That's like saying we're going to eliminate every Democrat. Right. It's like how and when. And then, I'm not equating Democrats to Hamas. I just want to put that up. But I'm just saying, it's an ideology. Mm-hmm. You don't eliminate an ideology. So, I want a permanent and a sustained ceasefire, but beyond that, there's a lot more to have a conversation about. It's not just about a ceasefire. It's about an end to the occupation. It's about, a return of the ability of right of return and resources. And, there's so much more to this. I think this is just a power play, and I do think this has a lot to do with the election. And I don't think that this is kind of a outward. I feel like they think we're dumb is what it is. I think they think that we're stupid enough to buy this. And, some people are. Yeah. Some people are stupid enough to buy it.
That was going to be my question.
Yeah,
it's around the timing of this. Yeah. Because as you have very eloquently noted, this has been 8 months of an attempted ceasefire by all accounts, by almost every nation at the UN. And now it's like, okay, we've decided that now is the right time. Does it feel strategic to you? And do you think it's going to work for Biden?
It all feels strategic. Every single part of this has been an attempt towards his election. This has nothing to do with his, I'm always telling people, like, the United States doesn't care about Israelis or Zionists or Jewish people or Palestinians or red or blue. They don't give a shit about you. Yeah. Truly. But as long as it can possibly win them an election or keep them in power. And this is like, he wants to keep his AIPAC money, but he's trying to figure out how he can keep his AIPAC money, but also, appease the people who are, maybe not going to vote for him. And he's really like shifty. And I don't think he realizes how deep this runs, and that he's really losing a lot of this is not going to save him. Nothing's going to save him at this point. You've committed a genocide. You've multiple times told people that you're a Zionist, proudly. You're not exactly going to run away with this just by proposing a very shifty and very, there's no one really knows what the internal dealings of the ceasefire resolution are.
Yeah, they're very vague.
Very vague.
They're saying it's a ceasefire, not permanent.
Yes.
They're saying that some hostages have to be released. They're not saying which side hostages are to be released.
I don't think they consider Palestinian hostages hostages, but
yeah. So it's all very vague.
Yes, very vague. And I don't think that it's going to save him. I mean, and I think that, there's a lot of shaming by Democrats to people who are saying, I'm either going to vote third party or I'm abstaining from voting.
Uncommitted vote
was beautiful in showing people how strong this block is. But yeah, no, I don't think he's coming back from this. And if his decision to support a genocide and support Israel over his own people means that Trump is the president, the next president, then that is Biden's fault.
Yeah.
And not anyone who's not voting for Biden.
Yeah. I think a lot of voters have been manipulated into thinking that this is going to be the pro-Palestinians' fault because there have been so many protests and so much and even like Kamala, when she was in the middle of an interview on Jimmy Fallon or something, like even she got protested. And I feel like a lot of centrists are being manipulated into thinking like, yeah, this is definitely, if he loses, this is going to be the pro-Palestinians' fault. But, there's just so much evidence that like you could have stopped this a long time ago. You could have ended it with the stopping of the funding. You could have ended it with the ending of selling arms. You could have ended this so many times.
Well, not no one, but most people who voted for Biden in the last election weren't voting for Biden. They were voting against Trump.
Yes.
And I think that's important. And you'd only get that once.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but we're only voting for you against another person one time. The next time, you need to show us how you're going to be a better president. I mean, he's doing things. He's fulfilling Trump promises in his administration.
His immigration policy alone.
Exactly.
Ooh.
So I'm sorry, but like, what's the difference
Yeah.
in a lot of ways? I think the only real difference is if Trump was president and this genocide was happening, Democrats would have come out against it just to be against Trump. So yeah, I'm not voting for a genocide supporter, and I'm also obviously not voting for a maniac. I'm voting third party, and I suggest people look into third party candidates because there's a few of them and they're great. And whether or not that means they're going to win the presidency, it does put more ability in us having a more, real and representative democracy. I really do suggest people look into third party. I think people are like, what do I do? And it's like, well, it's not red and blue are not the only possibilities. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, we did a whole episode on third parties, so people should definitely check that out.
Take a look at it.
Yes. So before I let you go, I definitely want to kind of end this on, just how powerful your advocacy has been.
Thank you.
And I think with Watermelon Pictures, you really have kind of stepped into the realm of not just talking about it, but being about it.
Thank you.
And a lot of people who do have the privilege often miss that, They often think that, if I just talk about it, that's enough.
Yep.
And it does say something, but being about it and taking that next step and being actionable.
Yeah.
And like you said, investing in the liberation and the freedom and the representation that's needed. I think that definitely puts you a step ahead of a lot of people. So thank you.
That means a lot. Thank you so much, really.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I want everyone to do that. And I think I implore people to, in whatever capacity you can, take the next step and to step out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Because, the colonization of your mind exists in your comfort zone. Then it's what you've been taught and subjected to and normalized.
Yeah.
So step out of your comfort zone and support, a free Palestine, or support, go out. There are support Free Sudan and a Free Congo and, support Puerto Rico and Hawaii and all of these places. Like, just really, start learning and educating yourself and step out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This has been beautiful. I could talk to you for hours.
Thank you, my love.
Thanks. Oh, this was awesome.
All right, everyone. I hope that you enjoyed that interview with Alana. Definitely stay tuned for more conversations in the future, because I definitely want to invite her back onto the podcast to talk about a whole host of other things. She does have a busy schedule, so it may take a minute, but I definitely want to have her back. She definitely has been very gracious. She is definitely somebody that I am keeping up with. She's very down to earth and very approachable person. I found her to be a very approachable person. And so I'm excited for you guys to see more of Alana on the podcast in the future. Now, if you are listening on Apple Podcasts, definitely make sure to give this a 5-star review. It definitely helps your girl out. And don't just press the 5 stars. Write a review as well. That definitely helps me out. And if you are watching this on YouTube, welcome. This is definitely going to be the first episode up on YouTube, but this is not the first episode of the podcast. So definitely go and watch the following episodes that I will be posting so that you can stay on top of everything that we talk about in this podcast. And I hope to see you guys very, very soon. I have a lot more interviews to post, but as you guys know, my schedule got so hectic that I literally have like 8 episodes to provide to you, 8 different interviews, and I just haven't had the time to post them all. So I am working on getting on a proper schedule so that I can get these interviews out to you every single week. But, sometimes we skip a week. So I appreciate your graciousness with that. All right. Aquí los dejo, mi gente. I will see you guys very, very soon. Take care. Talk to you later.